This is your hillbilly historian, come to tell you about how banks are robbing America. Yes, banks are robbing America. Uh, when I was young, you could put some money in a checking account and you got a little bit of interest on it. You could put money in a savings account in a bank and draw 6% interest on your money. Make money with money. But the common man can't do that anymore. In fact, banks are stealing every penny we have in this country. If you use a bank's services, you get charged for it. They charge you a monthly fee, and you get nothing in return except the service of writing checks and paying bills by writing checks. It's just simply horrifying how they are robbing America. A bank is a win-win situation. They hire some low-end employees, pay them minimum wage, and they sit there all day and take your money. And they give service in return, but not much. You don't get a product back. All you do is, you can write checks and pay bills. And that's all you get. You get no interest by keeping your money in a bank. And back in the early days, a bank could go belly up. But you don't hear that happening anymore. In fact, 2008, our banks made some really bad investments in mortgages, and they were going to go belly up. And the government, W. Bush, Barack Obama, John McCain, stole trillions from the American people to keep the banks from going belly up. And that's not right. The banks have always had a history of stealing from people. Look what they did to farmers and back in the 1930s when the Dust Bowl and all that, and people were having a hard time. Banks took advantage of them and gave them high interest loans and made them believe that no problem. And then they began foreclosing like crazy, taking people's land away from them. Evil. They were purely evil. And when movies won't show this, but when John Dillinger would come to town and rob a local bank, people would come out of stores and come down and stand around the bank, and when John Dillinger and his people come out, they'd get a standing ovation. They were cheered. They loved these people who were going around in 1932 and 33 and robbing all these banks. They were heroes. And people would volunteer to ride their running boards so that the police wouldn't shoot at them. They were wonderful heroes who were robbing the robbers, taken from the thieves. And then you got that meeting down at Jekyll Island in 1913 when Rothschilds and J.P. Morgan and all these people had a big secret meeting down there at Jekyll Island, and they came up with a way to rob the American wealth. See, America was the first really free nation on earth where the king didn't own everything, had a limited government, and the purpose of America was, like Calvin Coolidge said, the purpose of America is business and The government should stay the hell out of it. And people made money. They got rich. And when the government tampers around with the economy, they always screw it up. Always. But the banks had this secret meeting, and they created this plan, this agenda to steal the American wealth. There was no income tax in America. Abraham Lincoln passed one in 1861, the socialist, communist, Marxist bastard he was, and to steal the American wealth. And Supreme Court threw that out, and 10 years later, in 1871. And then in the 1890s, the Republicans tried again to steal the American wealth with an income tax, and the Supreme Court threw that one out. So when these bankers met at Jekyll Island in 1913, down off the coast of Georgia, they came up with a plan. First thing is they had to have a constitutional amendment permitting income tax so that they could steal your money. Now, when they that was part of the plan. The other part of the plan was to create what they would call a Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve is not federal, and it sure as hell ain't a reserve. It is a private corporation to steal your wealth, to loan money to the government at high interest rates, and to where they pay back. And you know, the interest rates on America's debt right now is approaching $1 trillion a year. That's a lot of money going into these banks, and they still almost went belly up with this mortgage fiasco back in 2008. You know, the same thing happened in Iceland a few years before. Iceland sent 47 bankers to prison for stealing their country's wealth. In this country, they ended up stealing about $2 or $3 trillion in 2008, and not one single banker was indicted or sent to prison. And they're still doing the same thing they were doing then, under a different name. They're stealing your wealth and getting away with it. The politicians are letting them get away with it, and they've been doing it forever. Now, Donald Trump has recently proposed zero income tax. And, buddy, that is revolutionary. That is a great, we need to carve his face on Mount Rushmore right now. He's already coming up with better things for the people than we've had in over 100 years. But anyway, back to Rothschild and J.P. Morgan and all them big thieves. They set up this agenda, and they got Congress to go along with it. Congress and the states passed an income tax. But back then, 1916, they set it to where you wouldn't have to pay a tax unless you made $4,000 or more a year. But that was to get you hooked. That was the bait on the fish hook. And because the average income back then was only about $1,000 to $1,200 a year. And so that was the bait. That was the wiggly worm on the fish hook to get you hooked into this income tax. And when they passed the 16th Amendment, allowing the government to steal your wealth, Cordell Hull, who was a Marxist socialist communist in the Woodrow Wilson socialist Marxist communist government administration, Cordell Hull gave us Karl Marx and Frederick Engels' graduated income tax system here in the United States, because that way they could steal more from those who had more. They could steal from the harder workers, steal from the people who earn the most, Steal the most from the most. And that was their plan, the Marxist, communist, graduated income tax system. Not a fair tax, not a percentage tax, not a flat tax, a graduated, communist, Marxist, graduated income tax. That's what they stuck you with. That was Cordell Hull, Secretary of State under Woodrow Wilson, and he was later Secretary of State under FDR. And Cordell Hull also got us into World War I and World War II. And they named buildings after him down in Nashville like he was some big son of a bitch, some big important son of a bitch. And he's not. He was a Marxist, a communist. And we've allowed too many of these socialist, Marxist, communists to come into our country and steal from us. And that income tax amendment in 1916 and that graduated income tax was to steal your hard-earned wealth. It was nothing but Marxism, communism come to America. And America was the greatest place on earth. And under Trump, if he gets rid of this income tax, see, before the income tax was started in 1916, our government paid all of its bills. Back then, the government had to pay their bills. Real money was real money. It's not like today where the Federal Reserve can just print millions, billions, trillions. It's like Everett Dirksen said one time, a billion here and a billion there, pretty soon it amounts up to real money. And now it's gone up to a trillion here and a trillion there, and it's amounting up to some serious money. We need to default on that $30 trillion debt that's going to be $100 trillion before you people realize it. Because they're just, it's all theft and numbers. And, buddy, they're putting it on your backs, the debt. The banks are corrupt. They are evil. The Templars, back in the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, Middle Ages, Dark Ages, in that period of time, the Templars set up a monetary system where you could deposit money in France and you could travel to Jerusalem and you could pull that money out. It would be safe. The Templars had a good system going. And the reason they consider Friday the 13th unlucky is because on the Friday the 13th, the Crown of France decided to murder all the Templars on a single night. And that turned out to be Friday the 13th. And they were going to murder all the Templars and steal their wealth, their banking system. And that, my folks, is your hillbilly historian's honest truth about banks, how corrupt and evil and crooked they are. And the banks are working hand in hand with the government to steal your wealth. Excuse me. And they will. They'll do it to you. And so it's amazing how they get away with it in this country. Donald Trump, if they don't murder him or steal the election from him again in 2024, he's learned enough about how corrupt our government is that he should be able to do something for the people. And hopefully he'll do something about this theft of our wealth. One thing about zeroing the income tax is, in raising tariffs, that'll be painful for a short time. We may have to pay a little more for smartphones and 72-inch wide TV screens and stuff like that. But it would help bring manufacturing back to the United States. It would put a stop to the Chinese theft of our wealth, which the Marxists in our government are helping them do. And it would create discussion on more honest ways to raise money for the government, like maybe a fair tax or a flat tax or something where every American has to contribute and where every American would benefit. And it takes a man with balls, a man like Trump, to make stuff like this happen. But anyway, that's your hillbilly historian coming to you from the Appalachian Hills of East Tennessee.